And Kenny began trying to emulate his hero, Greg Louganis, and he'd stand on the fireplace backwards facing and go right to his toes and then leap off and try to do a loop. Unfortunately, he did that poorly one time, and meeting his forehead to the brick is what caused the second set of stitches. The third set of stitches was in he was getting in the mood for Halloween, and while I was doing laundry in that self same family room with that self same fireplace, threw a sheet over his head and was wandering around, tripped, and forehead meets edge of bricks, and another trip to the hospital. Um, there was a point in time where they were considering putting Kenny's name on the St. Vincent emergency room, but I think there was one kid that beat him out in terms of frequency of treatment. I happen to believe that Kenny is, I would say, a very spiritual old soul, and he showed flashes of pretty deep wisdom, and one of them had to do with a dog that we had briefly, or I should say Jeff had. Jeff, I'm sure you'll remember Cody. I'm not sure Kenny will because he was very young, but Cody was a dog that we'd gotten from a shelter, and he was Jeff's dog. And at one point in a summer, very hot, not quite as hot as we're having here in Indianapolis this year, we went to the Pike Library to see a short film, and we left Cody out in the backyard on a chain. He had shade, he had a bowl of water, but something happened, and when we got home, unfortunately, Cody was in the final throes of dying from heat stroke. And we put him in the car, we rushed him to the vet and tried to save him, but were unable to. And I'm not sure why Kenny had a helium balloon in the house, but he did. And when we got home after losing Cody, he went and got the balloon and released it up into the air and let it go. And I asked him why he did that, and he said, Cody loved that balloon, so I'm sending it up to him. And I think that impressed me very deeply. That was very sweet. Now, one thing everybody should know is that even though I have the pictures to prove it, I couldn't locate them in time to do this. But Kenny, at the age of 3, nearly caused an international incident in Arlington Cemetery with the president of Argentina. He also almost died that day because he was 3 years old and was hell on wheels, and his dad had a series of business meetings for a week in Crystal City, Virginia, which is just outside Washington, D.C., and Kenny and I accompanied him for some fun. And one day I was taking Kenny on a tour of Arlington Cemetery. The day before, I'd taken him to the zoo. And I had put some forethought into this, knowing how active and quick Kenny was. And so I had the foresight to bring along and attach to his jacket by a back loop a cat leash. Because that way Kenny wasn't going anywhere, because Mom literally had him on a leash. And it came in very handy at the zoo, and it worked so well, I actually got a little complacent. This was in March, and it had been cold. Kenny had a ski jacket that zipped up, but the day had become warm, and so the jacket was unzipped. The cat leash was still attached to the hoop. We were at Arlington House, which, for those of you who have never been to Arlington National Cemetery, sits high upon a hill. It's the original house of Robert E. Lee, whose family's land the cemetery now occupies. One significant feature of the house is that there is a long sloping hill down from the house and that was where President John F. Kennedy was laid to rest, along with two of his young children that didn't survive infancy. And there was an eternal flame, and it's still there, burning. Well, we were touring Arlington House, and we were unaware of other things that were going on. But unbeknownst to us, the president of Argentina, who was in Washington, D.C. for a conference, was a humongous admirer of John F. Kennedy and had come to Arlington Cemetery to lay a wreath and pay his respects. Well, Kenny and I noticed this ceremony going on, and I went out onto the Arlington patio in order to take photographs of it. I had Kenny secured to my wrist with the cat leash, I thought, because at one moment, while I was focusing on taking a picture, I felt a tug on my wrist, and I pulled back to restrain Kenny, and that was when the fact that his jacket was unzipped undid us, and he was free. He was loose of the jacket, and he was flying delightedly down the hill to join in the festivities of the wreath laying. I was annoyed with him and tried to call him back until I heard a sound behind me and to the right. And I turned around in panic to see, stepping out from behind a significant row of tall bushes, a fully armored, helmeted, and well-armed SWAT gun sniper, who was at that point taking aim at Kenny. And I realized that they were part of the protective detail for the president of Argentina, and all I could imagine in my mind was my kid getting blown away because they thought of him as a security threat. So I used my best authoritative mom voice and said, "Kenny, stop." And for once in his life, thank God, he listened to me. So I persuaded him to come back up the hill. They searched him to make sure, not real intensively, but they searched him to make sure that he had no explosives and he wasn't a threat, which, had they known him personally, they would have been a great deal more thorough in their search. So that is how Kenny almost caused an international incident and almost got himself blown away by a SWAT sniper. Pause it.